Picture this. You're 7 months pregnant, standing in a room full of Seattle's most powerful people. Your billionaire husband is supposed to protect you, love you, stand by you. Instead, when you need him most, he catches another woman in his arms while you fall backward into broken glass. The cameras capture everything. Your blood on marble floors, your husband holding his mistress while you bleed. Within hours, the footage goes viral, but not for the reasons you'd expect. Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. This is about a tech mogul who's built his empire on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and possibly murder. A man who's perfected the art of making his victims look crazy while he plays the hero. Sarah Morrison thought she knew her husband. She thought she was safe. She thought her love story had a happy ending. She was wrong about everything. What she discovered next would shake Seattle's elite to its core and expose a criminal conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of power. But first, she had to survive her own husband's attempt to erase her from existence. The question isn't whether Blake Morrison is guilty. The question is, how many women has he silenced before Sarah? And will she live long enough to make sure she's the last? Stay with me for the next hour, because this story will change how you think about power, marriage, and what happens when a woman refuses to stay silent. The security footage went viral within hours. 7.2 million views on TikTok, 15 million on Twitter. The slow-motion replay showed it all. A pregnant woman in sapphire silk falling backward into a towering glass sculpture, while her billionaire husband caught another woman in his arms just feet away. The woman falling was Sarah Chen Morrison, 7 months pregnant, former MIT architectural prodigy. The man who chose to save his mistress instead of his wife was Blake Morrison, tech mogul and presidential hopeful. The woman he saved was Madison Sterling, 26 years old, blonde, and supposedly his campaign strategist. The comments section exploded with rage, memes, and hot takes. Some defended Blake, most didn't. But by morning, a new narrative emerged. Blake Morrison, master of spin, had turned his wife's humiliation into his redemption story. 3 months earlier, none of this seemed possible. Sarah stood in the penthouse office of Morrison Technologies, studying the blueprints spread across the mahogany conference table. The Seattle skyline glittered beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, a testament to the empire she had helped build. She had designed every Morrison Tech campus across the country. Each building bore her architectural signature: sustainable materials, natural light, spaces that made people feel human rather than corporate. Her work had made Blake billions, though her name appeared on none of the patents. Blake entered the room like he owned the air itself. At 38, he possessed the kind of magnetic confidence that made people lean in when he spoke. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suit tailored to perfection. He moved with the fluid grace of someone who had never been denied anything. "The Portland design is brilliant," he said, sliding his arms around Sarah's expanding waist from behind. The board approved it unanimously. Sarah leaned into his embrace, feeling their baby kick against her ribs. At 32, she had thought she knew what love looked like. Blake had swept her off her feet during her graduate program at MIT. He was the guest speaker who stayed after to debate sustainable architecture until 3 in the morning. Their first date lasted 14 hours. "I've been thinking about the residential project," Sarah said, turning in his arms. "The affordable housing initiative could revolutionize urban development." Blake's smile flickered for just a moment. "Let's focus on the campaign first. Once I'm in office, we can tackle housing policy from the top down." Sarah nodded, pushing down the familiar sting of having her ideas postponed. Blake's presidential campaign had consumed their lives for the past year. Every decision filtered through the lens of electability. Every public appearance carefully orchestrated. "Madison wants to discuss the tech policy platform," Blake continued. "She'll be joining us for dinner tonight." Madison Sterling, Blake's new campaign strategist, hired 3 months ago despite Sarah's objections. The woman was undeniably brilliant, with degrees from Harvard and Stanford, but something about her set Sarah's teeth on edge. Maybe it was the way Madison looked at Blake like he was a puzzle she couldn't wait to solve, or how she always found reasons to touch his arm during conversations. "I thought tonight was supposed to be about us," Sarah said quietly. "We haven't had dinner alone in weeks." Blake's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted to something sharper, more focused. "Rain check?" This is important. He kissed her forehead, already moving toward the door. Sarah watched him go, one hand pressed to her belly. The baby kicked again, as if sensing her mood. She turned back to the blueprints, trying to lose herself in the clean lines and careful measurements. Architecture had always been her sanctuary. In buildings, she could control every detail, anticipate every need, solve every problem, if only life worked the same way. Her phone chimed with a text from her former business partner, Jessica Torres. "Coffee tomorrow. I have something to show you." Sarah smiled for the first time that day. Jessica had been her closest friend since their Columbia days, the sister she'd never had. They had started their own firm together before Sarah met Blake. Jessica had understood when Sarah chose love over business, even supported the decision. "Can't wait," Sarah texted back. Outside, storm clouds gathered over Puget Sound. Rain began to spatter against the windows, each drop catching the light like scattered diamonds. Sarah didn't know it yet, but she was standing at the edge of a precipice. In 24 hours, everything she believed about her life would begin to crumble. The baby kicked once more, stronger this time. Sarah whispered to her unborn child, "Daddy's going to change the world, little one, and we're going to help him do it." She had no way of knowing that Blake Morrison was about to change her world in ways that would leave her fighting for her very survival. The next morning brought Seattle's typical drizzle and an unexpected revelation. Sarah met Jessica at their favorite coffee shop in Pioneer Square, the kind of place where local artists displayed their work and the baristas knew your order by heart. Jessica looked different. Nervous energy radiated from her as she fidgeted with her wedding ring. Dark circles shadowed her eyes and her usually perfect curls hung limp around her shoulders. "You look terrible," Sarah said, settling into the worn leather booth across from her friend. "Thanks. You look like you're glowing." Jessica forced a smile. "Pregnancy suits you. 7 months down, 2 to go." Sarah rubbed her belly. "What did you want to show me?" Jessica pulled out her tablet, fingers trembling slightly as she swiped to a folder marked Morrison Project. Sarah's breath caught as architectural renderings filled the screen. They were her designs, her residential housing project, the one Blake kept postponing. "Where did you get these?" Sarah whispered. "Blake hired our firm last month." Jessica couldn't meet her eyes. "He said you were too busy with the campaign to handle side projects." The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. Sarah stared at the screen, seeing 3 years of her work presented under Jessica's company logo. "These are mine. Every line, every calculation." "I know." Jessica's voice cracked. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I needed the money. David lost his job, and the firm was hemorrhaging cash. Blake offered enough to keep us afloat for 2 years. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Sarah's closest friend had stolen her work, and her husband had made it possible. "How long have you two been planning this?" "It's not like that. He approached me, said you had given permission." "I never gave permission." Sarah's voice rose, drawing stares from nearby tables. She lowered it to a harsh whisper. "I never even knew about this." Jessica finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He has that paperwork saying you assigned all architectural rights to him when you got married. Something about protecting joint assets." Sarah's mind raced. She remembered signing dozens of documents when they wed. Blake's lawyers had assured her it was standard procedure for protecting both their interests. She had trusted him completely. "I have to go." Sarah struggled to her feet, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "Sarah, please, let me explain." But Sarah was already walking away, her heart hammering against her ribs. The rain had intensified, soaking through her coat within seconds. She fumbled for her phone, calling Blake's direct line. "Morrison here. We need to talk, now." "Sarah, you sound upset. Is the baby okay?" The concern in his voice almost broke her resolve. This was Blake, the man who held her during morning sickness, who painted the nursery at midnight because he couldn't sleep with excitement. There had to be an explanation. "Meet me at home, please." An hour later, Blake found her in his study, legal documents spread across his desk. She had spent 45 minutes searching through their files, learning things that made her stomach turn. "You sold my designs to Jessica," she said without preamble. Blake loosened his tie, moving to the bar cart in the corner. "Want some tea?" You look pale. Answer me. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, taking his time. Your designs are Morrison Tech intellectual property. It's all legal. They're my ideas, my work. Created on my time in my building, using my resources. His voice remained calm, reasonable. The prenup is very clear about intellectual property rights. Sarah felt like she was drowning. Prenup? We signed a prenup. Page 47 of our marriage documents. Your signature is right there. He gestured to the papers on his desk. She found the page, staring at a signature that looked like hers but felt foreign. Had she really signed away 3 years of her life's work? The pregnancy brain fog made it hard to remember clearly. Why Jessica's firm? Why not handle it in-house? Blake's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Optics. A presidential candidate can't appear to be profiting from affordable housing initiatives. Better to have it come from an independent firm. My best friend's firm. The best architect in Seattle who wasn't my wife. The casual cruelty of the statement stole her breath. Blake continued as if discussing the weather. Jessica needed the work. You've been focused on the campaign. Everyone wins. Except me. You're my wife. My success is your success. He moved closer, reaching for her hands. After the election, we'll revisit this. I promise. Sarah pulled away. How many other promises have you made that I don't remember? Something flickered in Blake's eyes. Anger, maybe, or calculation. You've been under a lot of stress. Pregnancy hormones can affect memory, judgment. Maybe you should talk to Dr. Williams about adjusting your vitamins. Dr. Williams, Blake's personal physician, who had been monitoring her pregnancy since the beginning. Another person Sarah was supposed to trust completely. I remember my own work, Blake. Of course you do, but business decisions are complex. Let me handle the complicated stuff while you focus on growing our baby. He placed his hand on her belly, and she felt their child respond with a gentle kick. The gesture should have been tender, reassuring. Instead, it felt like a claim of ownership. Madison's coming by in an hour to prep for the tech summit, Blake continued. Why don't you rest? You look exhausted. Sarah nodded numbly, retreating to their bedroom. Through the window, she could see the city Blake planned to leave behind for Washington. Every building seemed to mock her now, reminders of the career she had sacrificed. She pulled out her phone and Googled intellectual property law, prenuptial agreements, spousal rights. The more she read, the more trapped she felt. Blake's lawyers had been thorough. A soft knock interrupted her research. Come in. Madison Sterling entered, looking like she had stepped off a magazine cover. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect beachy waves, her makeup flawless despite the Seattle rain. Sarah, Blake said you weren't feeling well. Madison's smile was bright, concerned, completely believable. Just tired. Pregnancy is so hard. My sister went through the same thing. Madison perched on the edge of the bed, uninvited. Can I get you anything? Tea? Something to eat? I'm fine. Blake mentioned you've been having some memory issues. Pregnancy brain is so real. Madison's tone was sympathetic, but her eyes remained calculating. He's just trying to protect you from unnecessary stress. Something in the way Madison said it triggered alarm bells. How much did this woman know about Sarah's private medical concerns? How long have you known my husband? Sarah asked carefully. We met at Harvard Business School, lost touch for years, then reconnected when I moved to Seattle. Madison's answer came too quickly, too smoothly. He's always been brilliant, even back then. Back then? Madison's smile faltered for just a second. I mean, when we were students. Briefly. Different programs, you know. Sarah nodded, filing away the inconsistency. Something was very wrong here, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what. After Madison left, Sarah sat alone in the growing darkness, one hand on her belly, the other clutching her phone. For the first time in 3 years of marriage, she wondered if she really knew her husband at all. The baby kicked, and Sarah whispered, It's okay, little one. Mommy's going to figure this out. Sure, but deep down, she was starting to suspect that figuring it out might destroy everything she thought she knew about her life. The Tech Innovation Awards represented everything Blake Morrison had worked toward. Seattle's most powerful gathered in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, a testament to the city's transformation from logging town to global tech hub. Sarah stood before her bathroom mirror, applying concealer under her eyes. 3 weeks had passed since discovering the theft of her designs. 3 weeks of careful observation and growing unease. Blake's behavior had grown more controlling, his explanations more elaborate. Madison's presence had become constant, her influence undeniable. "You look beautiful," Blake said, appearing behind her in the mirror. His hands settled on her shoulders, possessive rather than tender. Sarah wore midnight blue silk, specially tailored to accommodate her 8-month pregnancy. The dress was stunning, expensive, and felt like a costume she was required to wear. "Madison's riding with us," Blake continued. "She has some last-minute talking points for the speech." "Of course she does." Blake's hands tightened slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. I'm just tired." Sarah had learned to keep her suspicions hidden. Every confrontation led to the same response. She was hormonal, stressed, imagining things. The ride to the hotel was torture. Madison sat beside Blake in the back seat of their Tesla, her hand resting casually on his thigh as she reviewed his speech. Sarah, relegated to the front passenger seat, watched their reflection in the window. "The part about innovation and family values needs more punch," Madison said, her voice slightly breathless. "Maybe something about how technology should serve humanity, not replace it." "Perfect," Blake murmured. "You always know exactly what I need." Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. The double entendre wasn't lost on her, and Blake's tone suggested it wasn't accidental. The Fairmont Olympic buzzed with Seattle's elite. Tech executives, venture capitalists, politicians, and media personalities mingled under crystal chandeliers. Sarah recognized faces from magazine covers and television interviews, people who shaped the future with quarterly reports and Senate votes. Blake immediately disappeared into the crowd, Madison glued to his side. Sarah found herself alone at their assigned table, watching her husband work the room with practiced charm. Every laugh, every handshake, every photo opportunity was calculated for maximum impact. "Mrs. Morrison?" Sarah turned to find Marcus Wright, the investigative journalist from the Seattle Times. She knew his work, respected his integrity, though Blake had warned her to avoid him. "Mr. Wright, may I sit? I was hoping we could chat." "About what?" Marcus glanced around, then leaned closer. "Your husband's labor practices. I'm investigating Morrison Tech's use of undocumented workers in their overseas facilities." Sarah's stomach clenched. "I don't know anything about that." "I think you know more than you realize." Marcus pulled out his phone, showing her a photograph. "This was taken at your Portland facility last month. Children, Mrs. Morrison, some as young as 12. The image made Sarah's blood run cold. She recognized the building, her design, but the workers in the photo looked exhausted, desperate. Blake would never allow this. "Your husband has plausible deniability. The work is subcontracted through shell companies, but the paper trail leads back to Morrison Tech." Marcus leaned closer. "I think you're not complicit. I think you're another victim." Before Sarah could respond, Blake appeared at her shoulder. "Right. I see you're harassing my pregnant wife." "Just having a conversation about architecture," Marcus replied smoothly. "My wife doesn't give interviews without clearing it through our legal team." Blake's smile was sharp as broken glass. "I'm sure you understand." Marcus stood, pocketing his phone. "Mrs. Morrison, if you ever want to talk about your designs, your real work, I'd love to feature your story." After he left, Blake's grip on Sarah's shoulder became painful. What did he want? He was asking about the Portland building. "That vulture is trying to tank my campaign with manufactured scandals." Blake's voice was low, dangerous. "You didn't tell him anything, did you?" "Of course not." "Good, because Marcus Wright destroyed my first wife's life with his lies." Sarah froze. "Your first wife?" Blake's expression shifted back to practice charm. "Ancient history, long before I met you." But Sarah's mind was racing. Blake had never mentioned a previous marriage. In 3 years together, he had claimed she was his first and only love. The evening continued with speeches and awards. Blake's presentation on technology and human values received a standing ovation. Sarah watched from the audience, feeling increasingly disconnected from the man on stage. Then came the reception. Sarah excused herself to use the restroom, needing space to process what Marcus had told her. The bathroom was empty, elegant, all marble and gold fixtures. She splashed cool water on her wrists, trying to calm her racing heart. The baby was active tonight, responding to her stress with restless movement. When she emerged, the reception area had grown more crowded. Blake stood near a towering glass sculpture, the centerpiece of the evening, representing Seattle's innovative spirit. Madison was beside him, laughing at something he had said. As Sarah approached, she overheard fragments of their conversation. After the election, Blake was saying, "We can make this official." "I can't wait much longer," Madison replied, her hand trailing down his chest. "This pretending is killing me." Sarah's world tilted. She stepped closer, no longer caring about discretion. "Blake?" Both turned, Madison's face flushing guilty red, Blake's expression cycling through surprise, calculation, and finally cold determination. "Sarah, you startled us." "What did she mean? Make this official?" Madison's smile was triumphant now. All pretense dropped. "He didn't tell you? Blake and I are engaged. Have been for months." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. "Engaged?" "Madison, not here," Blake warned. "She deserves to know," Madison continued, her voice syrupy with false concern. "Blake's been trying to find the right time to tell you. After the baby comes, of course." Sarah's vision blurred. The reception noise faded to a distant hum. "Blake, tell me she's lying." Blake's silence was answer enough. "How could you?" Sarah's voice cracked. "We're married. I'm carrying your child." "Arrangements change," Blake said quietly. "Political realities require sacrifices." "Sacrifices?" Sarah's voice rose, drawing stares from nearby guests. "I'm not a sacrifice. I'm your wife." "You're hysterical," Blake said sharply. "Think about the baby." Sarah stumbled backward, her heel catching on the marble floor. In her peripheral vision, she saw Madison deliberately step closer to Blake, positioning herself to be caught if needed. Time slowed as Sarah felt herself falling. Behind her loomed the glass sculpture, its sharp edges glittering like frozen lightning. She reached out desperately, but Blake's arms were already moving toward Madison, who had staged a theatrical stumble. The impact drove the breath from Sarah's lungs. Glass exploded around her, shards biting into her arms and back. Blood bloomed across her silver dress as the sculpture collapsed in a cascade of destruction. Through the chaos, Sarah saw Blake holding Madison protectively, his face a mask of calculated concern as cameras flashed around them. "Someone call an ambulance," Blake shouted. But he didn't move toward Sarah, didn't kneel beside her, didn't check if their baby was okay. He stood holding his mistress while his pregnant wife bled among broken glass, and every camera in the room captured his choice. As consciousness faded, Sarah heard Madison's voice, sweet as poison. "Poor thing. Pregnancy hormones can make women so unstable." The last thing Sarah saw before the darkness took her was Blake nodding in agreement, already spinning the narrative that would destroy her life. Sarah woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the antiseptic smell of Seattle General's ICU. Her body ached in ways she had never imagined possible, every breath sending sharp pains through her ribs. Bandages covered her arms where glass had carved deep furrows. "The baby," she whispered, her hand flying to her belly. "Still there," said a gentle voice. Dr. Patricia Wells, the night shift psychiatrist, sat beside the bed. She was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Strong heartbeat, normal movement. You both got lucky." Relief flooded through Sarah, followed immediately by confusion. "Why are you here? I need an OB, not a psychiatrist." Dr. Wells consulted her tablet. "Your husband requested a psychological evaluation. He's concerned about your mental state." "My mental state?" He described several incidents of paranoia, memory loss, and erratic behavior. "Last night's fall appears to have been intentional." Sarah struggled to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. "Intentional? I slipped. My husband was holding another woman when I needed help. According to witnesses, you became agitated when Mr. Morrison was speaking with his campaign manager. You accused them of having an affair, then threw yourself against the sculpture." "That's not what happened," Dr. Wells made a note. "Can you tell me your version of events?" Sarah recounted the evening, watching the doctor's expression grow increasingly skeptical with each detail. When she finished, Dr. Wells set down her tablet. Mrs. Morrison, these delusions of infidelity are common during pregnancy. Combined with your husband's reports of memory problems, they're not delusions. Madison told me they were engaged. Your husband's campaign manager? The woman he's known for 3 months? Sarah's certainty wavered. Had Madison actually said they were engaged? Or had Sarah's stressed mind misinterpreted an innocent conversation? I heard what I heard. Stress can distort perception. Your husband is very concerned about you and the baby. As if summoned by her words, Blake appeared in the doorway. He looked haggard, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, the picture of a devoted husband keeping vigil. Thank God you're awake, he said, rushing to her bedside. I was so scared. His performance was flawless. Sarah almost believed it herself. Where's Madison? She asked. Blake exchanged a look with Dr. Wells. She's handling the media fallout. The video of your fall is everywhere. Video? Blake pulled out his phone, showing her the footage. Sarah watched herself stumble backward, saw Blake catch Madison, witnessed her own collision with the glass sculpture. From this angle, it did look intentional. The comments are brutal, Blake continued. People are saying you tried to hurt the baby to get attention. Sarah stared at the screen, horrified. The video had been edited to remove the conversation she had overheard, making it appear that she had simply snapped without provocation. That's not what happened. I know you didn't mean it, Blake said gently, but we need to get you help. Dr. Wells cleared her throat. I'm recommending a 72-hour psychiatric hold for evaluation. You can't be serious. It's for your safety and the baby's safety, Blake said. Just until we get your medication adjusted. What medication? The antidepressants Dr. Williams prescribed. You've been forgetting to take them. Sarah's mind reeled. I'm not taking antidepressants. Memory loss is another symptom, Dr. Wells said gently. Your husband brought your pill bottles from home. Blake produced a pharmacy bag containing 3 prescription bottles with Sarah's name on them. Medications she had never seen before. Prescriptions she had never filled. I didn't take these. The pharmacy records show you've been picking them up monthly, Dr. Wells said. Your blood work confirms their presence in your system. The room began to spin. Either Sarah was losing her mind, or Blake was systematically poisoning her while convincing everyone she was mentally ill. I want to call my lawyer. Of course, Blake said. I'll get Jennifer on the phone. Jennifer Walsh, Morrison Tech's corporate counsel, another person loyal to Blake rather than Sarah. My own lawyer, not yours. Blake's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold underneath. Sarah, you're not thinking clearly. Let me handle the legal complications. I want Marcus Wright. The journalist? Dr. Wells looked alarmed. Mrs. Morrison, contacting the media right now would be extremely damaging to your case. My case? The psychiatric evaluation will determine whether you're fit to make your own medical decisions, Dr. Wells explained. If you're found incompetent, your husband will have guardianship authority. The trap was perfect. If Sarah fought the diagnosis, it would be seen as evidence of her instability. If she accepted it, Blake would have legal control over her and their baby. You can't do this. I'm trying to save your life, Blake said, taking her hand. And our child's life. A nurse entered with a syringe. Time for your medication, Mrs. Morrison. What is it? Mild sedative, Dr. Wells said. To help you rest. Sarah tried to pull away, but Blake held her arm steady while the nurse administered the injection. Within minutes, the world began to blur around the edges. Sleep now, Blake whispered. When you wake up, we'll figure out how to fix this. As consciousness faded, Sarah heard Blake speaking quietly to Dr. Wells in the hallway. How long until the competency hearing? If she continues to resist treatment, we can expedite it. Maybe a week. And custody of the baby? Automatic if she's found unfit. Sarah tried to call out, to fight against the drugs pulling her under, but her body refused to obey. The last thing she heard was Blake's voice, cold and calculated now that he thought she couldn't hear. Make sure Marcus Wright doesn't get near her, and increase the dosage if necessary. In the gathering darkness, Sarah finally understood the truth. Blake wasn't trying to save her life. He was systematically destroying it, piece by piece, until nothing remained but the shell of a woman who had once dared to dream. The machines continued their steady beeping as Sarah slipped into drug-induced sleep, unaware that Blake was already making arrangements for her permanent removal from their child's life. 3 days became 3 weeks at Northwest Psychiatric Institute, a private facility nestled in the mountains outside Seattle. Sarah had fought the transfer, demanding lawyers and witnesses, but her protests were documented as further evidence of her deteriorating mental state. The facility was beautiful in a sterile way, all glass and natural wood designed to soothe troubled minds. Sarah's room overlooked a garden where other patients wandered in supervised groups, their movements sluggish from medication. "How are we feeling today, Sarah?" Dr. Margaret Foster, her assigned psychiatrist, settled into the chair across from Sarah's bed. Dr. Foster was younger than Dr. Wells, ambitious and completely convinced of Blake's version of events. "I feel like I'm being held prisoner. These feelings of persecution are part of your condition. The pregnancy hormones combined with your underlying anxiety disorder have created a perfect storm." Sarah had heard variations of this speech every day for 3 weeks. Her medical file had grown thick with diagnoses: postpartum psychosis, delusional disorder, borderline personality disorder. Each label made her protests seem less credible. "I want to see my baby. The ultrasounds show healthy development. Mr. Morrison has been very involved in your prenatal care." Blake visited twice a week, always accompanied by Madison, who played the role of concerned family friend to perfection. During these visits, Blake was tender and worried, holding Sarah's hand while discussing treatment options with Dr. Foster. "Has she shown any improvement?" Blake asked during his latest visit, his voice carefully modulated to suggest hope tinged with desperation. "Some days are better than others," Dr. Foster replied, "but she's still fixated on her delusions about your relationship with Mrs. Sterling." Madison squeezed Blake's shoulder supportively. "It must be so hard watching someone you love lose touch with reality." Sarah wanted to scream. Instead, she remained silent, having learned that any emotional response was documented as evidence of instability. "What about the baby?" Blake continued. "Is it safe for Sarah to give birth in this state? We're monitoring the situation closely. If necessary, we can arrange for delivery here under controlled circumstances." The casual discussion of her body, as if she weren't present, made Sarah's skin crawl. They were planning to take her baby, and there was nothing she could do to stop them. After Blake and Madison left, Sarah lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. 9 months pregnant now, her body felt foreign and unwieldy. The baby's movements had become less frequent, possibly affected by the cocktail of medications she was forced to take. Knock, knock. Dr. Patricia Wells entered, the same psychiatrist who had first evaluated Sarah in the hospital. "Mind if I sit?" Sarah was surprised to see her. "I thought Dr. Foster was handling my case." "She is. I'm just consulting." Dr. Wells settled into the chair, her expression more thoughtful than Sarah had remembered. "How are you really feeling? You want the truth or the party line?" "The truth would be refreshing." Sarah studied the older woman's face, searching for signs of deception. "Why do you care?" "Because something's been bothering me about your case." Dr. Wells pulled out a folder. "I've been reviewing your medical history, and some things don't add up." Hope fluttered in Sarah's chest, dangerous and painful. "What kind of things?" "The medications in your system the night of your fall. The combination doesn't make sense for treating depression or anxiety. It's more consistent with someone trying to induce confusion and memory problems." Sarah sat up straighter. "You believe me?" "I'm starting to. I've also been researching your husband's first marriage." "Blake was married before?" "Amanda Morrison, brilliant software engineer, died 3 years ago. Officially ruled a suicide, but there were questions." Sarah's blood chilled. "What kind of questions?" "She had been behaving erratically in the months before her death. Memory problems, paranoia, claims that Blake was trying to control her. Sound familiar?" The room seemed to tilt. "What happened to her?" "Overdose of psychiatric medications. Same medications found in your system." "Ah!" Sarah's hands began to shake. "He killed her." "I can't prove that, but I can prove he's been systematically drugging you." Dr. Wells showed her a lab report. Hair follicle analysis from when you were admitted. The medications show up going back 6 months, long before you were supposedly prescribed them. Can you get me out of here? Not easily. Blake has legal guardianship now, and the baby complicates everything. But I might be able to help another way. Dr. Wells glanced around, then leaned closer. There's a journalist who's been asking questions about Morrison Tech. Marcus Wright. He's been trying to get information about Blake's business practices, but he needs someone on the inside. Blake warned me away from him. Because Wright's close to exposing something big. Labor violations, environmental cover-ups, possibly worse. But he needs evidence from someone with access to Blake's private files. Sarah's mind raced. I don't have access anymore. You will when the baby comes. Blake will want you at home for appearances, probably with a live-in nurse to monitor your condition. That could be our window. Before Sarah could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Dr. Wells quickly tucked the folder away as Dr. Foster appeared in the doorway. Dr. Wells, I wasn't expecting you today. Just checking on our patient. How's the birth plan coming along? We're scheduling a C-section for next week, Dr. Foster said. Mr. Morrison wants to ensure the safest possible delivery. Sarah's heart stopped. Next week? I'm not due for 2 weeks. The baby's development is adequate for early delivery, Dr. Foster explained, and your mental state makes natural labor inadvisable. After both doctors left, Sarah sat alone with the crushing realization that she was running out of time. Blake was planning to take her baby, probably place her in long-term psychiatric care, and eliminate any threat she might pose to his carefully constructed life. That night, Sarah lay awake listening to the sounds of the institution around her. Somewhere in the building, other women were fighting their own battles against systems designed to silence them. The thought was both terrifying and oddly comforting. She placed her hands on her belly, feeling her child's restless movement. I'm going to get us out of here, she whispered. I don't know how yet, but I promise you, we're going to be free. The baby kicked once, as if in response to her words. Sarah closed her eyes and began to plan. She had 1 week to find a way to escape Blake's trap, expose his crimes, and save both their lives. Outside her window, Seattle sparkled in the distance, a city full of people who thought they knew Blake Morrison as a visionary leader. Soon, Sarah vowed, they would learn the truth about the monster hiding behind his perfect smile. The morning Sarah went into labor, Seattle was shrouded in its typical autumn fog. She woke to sharp pains in her lower back and the wetness of her water breaking. For a moment, panic overtook her. This wasn't supposed to happen for another week. Nurse, she called, her voice cracking with pain. The response was swift and efficient. Within minutes, Sarah was being wheeled to the facility's medical wing, a sterile environment that felt more like a laboratory than a birthing center. Dr. Foster appeared beside her gurney, clipboard in hand. Everything's going to be fine, Sarah. We're prepared for this. It's too early. Full term is 37 weeks. You're at 38. The baby will be perfectly healthy. As another contraction hit, Sarah gripped the side rails, her mind racing. Blake wasn't supposed to arrive for hours. This early labor might be her only chance to speak freely. I want to call my husband. Already done. He's on his way. Of course he was. Blake's control extended even to the timing of their child's birth. The labor progressed quickly, almost violently. Sarah had imagined a peaceful delivery, perhaps at home with soft music and Blake holding her hand. Instead, she labored alone except for medical staff who treated her like a patient rather than a mother. During a brief lull between contractions, Dr. Wells appeared at her bedside. The older psychiatrist looked around carefully before speaking. How are you holding up? Like I'm being torn apart. I have something that might help. Dr. Wells pretended to check Sarah's IV while slipping something small into her hand. Keep this hidden until you're ready. Sarah palmed the object without looking at it. Another contraction hit, and she bit back a scream. Blake arrived as she entered the final stage of labor, his presence filling the room with false warmth and concern. He wore scrubs and moved to her side with practiced tenderness. I'm here, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay. Madison hovered near the door, dressed as a concerned family friend. Even in labor, Sarah couldn't escape the woman who had destroyed her marriage. She wanted to be here for support, Blake explained, following Sarah's gaze. Madison's been like family during this difficult time. Sarah wanted to laugh at the absurdity. her husband's mistress, present at the birth of their child, welcomed by medical staff who saw nothing inappropriate about the arrangement. The final push came with the intensity that bordered on violence. Sarah screamed, no longer caring who heard or what they documented. Pain consumed her until suddenly, blessedly, it was over. "It's a girl," Dr. Foster announced. A girl. Sarah's heart broke and soared simultaneously. Through her exhaustion, she heard her daughter's first cry, strong and indignant. "Can I hold her?" "Let's get her cleaned up first," Dr. Foster said. But her tone was different now, more protective. Sarah watched them weigh and measure her daughter, saw her tiny fists waving in protest at the cold world she had entered. When they finally placed the baby in her arms, Sarah felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "She's perfect," Blake said, his voice oddly strained. For the first time in months, Sarah saw genuine emotion in her husband's eyes. Whatever else Blake was, he was this child's father, and the reality of holding his daughter had affected him. "What will you name her?" Madison asked from the doorway. "Emma," Sarah said without hesitation. "Emma Rose Morrison." Blake nodded slowly. "It's beautiful." The moment of family connection lasted exactly 30 seconds before Dr. Foster cleared her throat. "Mrs. Morrison needs rest. We should let mother and baby recover." "I want to hold her longer." "Hospital policy. Newborns need immediate monitoring, especially given your condition." Sarah's condition, always her condition, as if loving her child and wanting to protect her, was a symptom of mental illness. They took Emma to the nursery despite Sarah's protests. Blake kissed Sarah's forehead with what might have been genuine affection before following the medical staff out. Madison lingered for a moment, her expression unreadable. "She's lucky to have such a devoted father," Madison said quietly. The words were a knife thrust, precise and devastating. Madison was reminding Sarah that Blake's devotion was to Emma, not to her mother. Alone at last, Sarah examined the object Dr. Wells had given her. It was a small digital recorder, no bigger than a thumb drive. Her heart began to race as she understood its purpose. Evidence. A way to record Blake's true intentions when he thought she was sedated and helpless. She tucked the device under her pillow just as exhaustion claimed her. When she woke, it was dark outside, and Blake was sitting beside her bed. "How long was I sleeping?" "6 hours. Emma's doing beautifully. Perfect weight, strong lungs." Blake's smile seemed genuine. "She has your eyes." "Where is she?" "Nursery. They're being very careful about infection control." Sarah knew this was a lie. Healthy newborns stayed with their mothers unless there were complications. They were keeping Emma away deliberately. "When can we go home?" Blake's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Dr. Foster wants to monitor you both for a few more days. Your emotional state during delivery was concerning." "I screamed during childbirth. That's normal." "The things you said while sedated were troubling. Accusations, threats. Dr. Foster thinks you may be experiencing postpartum psychosis." Sarah's blood chilled. Postpartum psychosis was grounds for immediate custody removal. "What things?" "I don't remember saying anything." "You threatened to take Emma and disappear. You said you'd rather die than let me have her." "I never said that." "It's all documented. Dr. Foster is very thorough." The trap was closing. Blake had positioned Emma's birth as evidence of Sarah's deteriorating mental state, creating a narrative that would justify taking the baby permanently. "I want to see my daughter." "Of course, tomorrow when you're feeling stronger." Blake stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Sarah, I want you to know that whatever happens, Emma will be loved and cared for. That's what matters most." The words were a farewell. Blake was telling her that her role as Emma's mother was ending. After he left, Sarah activated the recorder and hid it more carefully. Tomorrow, when Blake thought she was defeated and broken, she would get him to reveal his true plans. She had lost everything else, but she would not lose her daughter without a fight. Outside her window, the lights of Seattle twinkled like distant stars. Somewhere in this building, Emma was sleeping in a sterile nursery, unaware that her first days of life were being used as weapons in a war she didn't know existed. Sarah pressed her hand to her still tender abdomen and made a silent vow. She would expose Blake Morrison's crimes, save her daughter, and ensure that no other woman suffered what Amanda Morrison had endured. The recorder felt warm against her palm, a small device that might contain the power to change everything. The next morning brought Dr. Foster with discharge papers and a list of conditions that made Sarah's heart sink. She could go home, but with restrictions that amounted to house arrest. 24-hour nursing supervision, Dr. Foster explained, reading from her tablet. Daily medication compliance checks, weekly psychiatric evaluations. Any violation results in immediate readmission. For how long? Until we're confident you're stable. Mr. Morrison has arranged for the best private care. Blake stood beside the bed, the picture of a devoted husband managing a family crisis. Whatever it takes to keep you and Emma safe. Emma. Sarah's arms ached to hold her daughter, but she had been allowed only supervised visits since the birth. Each interaction was monitored and documented, every maternal instinct cataloged as potential evidence of instability. When can I take Emma home? Today, Blake said. She's already in the car. Relief flooded through Sarah until she realized the implication. Blake had custody of Emma. He could take her home while Sarah remained hospitalized if necessary. The drive back to their Belltown penthouse was surreal. Sarah sat in the passenger seat while Blake drove, Madison in the back with Emma's car seat. The image of the other woman caring for her newborn while Sarah was relegated to observer status made her physically ill. The nursery is ready, Madison said softly. I helped Blake finish the details while you were recovering. Another knife thrust. Madison had completed Sarah's nest while Sarah fought for her sanity in a psychiatric ward. Their penthouse felt foreign, like a museum exhibit of someone else's life. Everything was exactly as Sarah had left it, but the context had changed completely. She was no longer the architect of this space. She was its newest prisoner. Mrs. Helen Crawford, the live-in nurse, was waiting in the foyer. She was a stern woman in her 50s, recommended by Dr. Foster and paid by Blake. Her smile was professional rather than warm. Mrs. Morrison, I'm here to help with your recovery and Emma's care. I can care for my own daughter. Of course, I'm just here for support. Mrs. Crawford's tone suggested otherwise. Blake carried Emma upstairs to the nursery, Madison trailing behind with diaper bags and flowers. Sarah followed slowly, her C-section incision pulling with each step. The nursery was perfect. Soft yellows and whites, custom furniture, a mobile of Seattle landmarks that Sarah had designed months ago. It should have been a moment of pure joy. Instead, Sarah watched Blake place Emma in the crib, while Madison organized baby supplies with the efficiency of someone who belonged there. Why don't you rest, Blake suggested. Mrs. Crawford can handle the feeding schedule. I'm breastfeeding. Dr. Foster recommends formula. Some of your medications could affect breast milk. Another piece of the maternal bond severed with medical justification. Sarah nodded numbly, too exhausted to fight. That evening, after Madison left and Mrs. Crawford retired to the guest room, Sarah finally found herself alone with Blake. Emma slept peacefully in her crib while they sat in the living room overlooking Elliott Bay. This is temporary, Blake said, pouring himself a scotch. Once you're stable, things can go back to normal. Sarah activated the hidden recorder, praying it would pick up their conversation from across the room. What's normal, Blake? What do you want from me? I want my wife back. The woman I married, not this paranoid stranger. I'm not paranoid. I know about Amanda. Blake's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Amanda, your first wife, the one who died under mysterious circumstances. Amanda killed herself. It was tragic, but it has nothing to do with us. She was experiencing the same symptoms I am. Memory problems, paranoia, claims that you were controlling her. Blake set down his glass carefully. Who told you about Amanda? Does it matter? She's dead, and now you're trying to do the same thing to me. You're being ridiculous. Am I? You've been drugging me for months, stealing my work, convincing everyone I'm mentally ill. The only question is whether you plan to kill me or just lock me away permanently. Blake was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. When he spoke, his voice was different, colder, more honest. You were supposed to be perfect, Sarah. Beautiful, talented, compliant. Instead, you became a liability. Because I found out about your crimes? Because you couldn't stay in your lane. Amanda made the same mistake. She started asking questions about things that didn't concern her. Sarah's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. So you killed her. Amanda killed herself. I just created the circumstances that made it inevitable. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Blake seemed almost relieved to finally speak truthfully. The same circumstances you've created for me. You're stronger than Amanda. That's been the problem. Blake leaned forward. She broke after 6 months. You've lasted 3 years. Why not just divorce me? Divorce is messy, expensive, bad for the campaign. Blake's smile was sharp. A tragic suicide after postpartum depression? That's a story that generates sympathy rather than scandal. And Emma. Emma will be raised by people who understand their place in the world. Madison will be an excellent stepmother. Sarah fought to keep her expression neutral, even as rage coursed through her veins. You have it all planned out. I've learned from experience. Amanda's death was sloppy, raised too many questions. Your breakdown has been much more carefully orchestrated. Blake stood, moving to the window. The beauty of psychological manipulation is that it's nearly impossible to prove. Who's going to believe the word of a woman who's been hospitalized for mental illness? Someone might. Like Marcus Wright? I've already discredited him as a scandal-mongering journalist with a vendetta against me. Besides, he'll never get access to you now. Blake turned back to her, his expression almost fond. You were brilliant, Sarah. Your architectural work helped build my empire. It's fitting that your destruction will help secure it. You're a monster. I'm a pragmatist. Sentiment is a luxury I can't afford. Blake moved toward the stairs. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start the final phase, which is? Dr. Foster believes you need more intensive treatment, long-term residential care, possibly indefinite. Mrs. Crawford will document your continued instability, and within a week, you'll be back in the institution. And Emma will grow up believing her mother was tragically lost to mental illness. Madison and I will give her a stable, loving home. Blake paused at the foot of the stairs. For what it's worth, I did love you once, but love doesn't build empires. After he disappeared upstairs, Sarah sat alone in the dark, the recorder burning like a coal in her palm. She had everything she needed to destroy Blake Morrison, but she was trapped in a system designed to silence her. Tomorrow she would have to decide whether to fight or flee. Either choice meant risking everything, including Emma's safety. But as she listened to her daughter's soft breathing through the baby monitor, Sarah knew she had no choice. She would burn Blake's empire to the ground, even if she had to light the match with her own life. The recorder contained Blake's confession, but getting it to the right person would require a miracle. Sarah closed her eyes and began to pray for Marcus Wright to find a way to reach her before it was too late. Sarah had 12 hours before Mrs. Crawford would document her deteriorating condition to Dr. Foster. 12 hours to escape, deliver the recording to Marcus Wright, and expose Blake's crimes before losing Emma forever. The plan was desperate and probably doomed, but it was all she had. At 3 a.m., Sarah crept into the nursery where Emma slept peacefully in her crib. Her daughter was barely a week old, too young for the chaos Sarah was about to unleash. But staying meant certain separation, possibly forever. I'm sorry, baby girl, Sarah whispered, carefully lifting Emma from the crib. Mama's going to fix this. Emma stirred but didn't wake as Sarah gathered the diaper bag she had pre-packed with supplies. Moving silently through the penthouse, she avoided the creaking floorboard near the master bedroom where Blake slept. Mrs. Crawford's room was at the end of the hall, door slightly ajar. Sarah could hear the woman's steady breathing as she tiptoed past. The live-in nurse had been drugging Sarah's evening tea with mild sedatives, expecting her to sleep until morning. The elevator seemed impossibly loud in the silence. Sarah held her breath as it descended to the parking garage, praying Blake wouldn't wake and discover her absence. Her Tesla was blocked by Blake's Range Rover, but she had anticipated this. The building's maintenance supervisor, Tommy Chen, was working the night shift. Sarah had helped his daughter with college applications 2 years ago, and he still owed her a favor. Mrs. Morrison? Tommy emerged from the utility room, surprised to see her. Everything okay? Family emergency. Can you move Blake's car? I need to get out. Tommy glanced at the baby in her arms, then at Sarah's desperate expression. Without asking questions, he took Blake's keys from the valet board and moved the Range Rover. Thanks, Tommy. You probably saved my life. The drive through empty Seattle streets felt surreal, Sarah had Emily's birth certificate and her own passport, but no money beyond the $50 in her purse. Blake controlled all their accounts, and using credit cards would leave a digital trail. Her destination was a 24-hour diner in Georgetown, where Marcus Wright had left word through Dr. Wells that he would be waiting. The message had come through a nurse who owed Dr. Wells a favor, part of an underground network of women who helped other women escape abusive situations. The key diner occupied a converted railway car, its neon sign flickering in the pre-dawn darkness. Through the windows, Sarah saw Marcus sitting alone in a corner booth, nursing coffee and watching the door. Emma was crying softly as Sarah entered, the unfamiliar sounds and smells distressing her. Marcus looked up, his expression shifting from hope to alarm as he took in Sarah's appearance. She was still in her nightgown and robe, her hair uncombed, her eyes wild with desperation. "Sarah! Jesus, what happened?" "I have what you need." Sarah slid into the booth across from him, pulling out the recorder. "Blake's confession. Everything." Marcus's eyes widened as he examined the device. "You recorded him. Last night, he admitted to killing his first wife and planning to destroy me the same way. Uh, this is incredible. This will end him. Only if you can get it out before he finds me." Sarah glanced toward the diner's windows, expecting to see Blake's Range Rover at any moment. "He's planning to have me committed permanently. Mrs. Crawford is documenting my instability as we speak." Marcus pulled out his laptop, connecting the recorder and beginning to download the files. "This will take a few minutes. Are you safe?" "For now. But once Blake realizes I'm gone." As if summoned by her words, Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Blake's name on the screen made her stomach clench. "Don't answer it," Marcus advised. The phone continued ringing as Marcus worked. Emma's crying grew louder, drawing attention from the diner's few other customers. Sarah tried to soothe her daughter while watching the download progress bar inch forward. Come on," Marcus muttered. Sarah's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Blake. "Where are you, Mrs. Crawford is worried." Another text followed immediately. "Sarah, this isn't helping your case. Come home and we can work this out." Then, "If you don't return immediately, I'm calling the police. A mentally unstable woman with a newborn is dangerous." "He's already building the narrative," Sarah said, showing Marcus the messages. "Almost done." Marcus's fingers flew over his keyboard. "I'm uploading this to a secure server and sending copies to 3 different news outlets." The download completed just as headlights swept across the diner's windows. A black Range Rover pulled into the parking lot, followed by a police cruiser. "Shit," Marcus said. "How did he find you so fast?" Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized the answer. "The car. The Tesla has GPS tracking." Blake emerged from the Range Rover accompanied by 2 police officers. Through the window, Sarah could see him gesturing toward the diner, his expression a perfect mask of concern and anguish. "They're coming in," Marcus said. "What do you want to do?" Sarah looked down at Emma, then at the laptop screen showing the uploaded files. "Is it enough?" "More than enough. This recording will destroy him. Then it doesn't matter what happens to me." The diner's bell chimed as Blake entered with the officers. His eyes found Sarah immediately, his relief appearing genuine to anyone watching. "Thank God you're safe," he said, approaching slowly. "We were so worried." "Sir, please stay back," one of the officers said. He was young, probably new to the force, and clearly uncomfortable with the domestic situation. "This is my wife and newborn daughter," Blake explained. "She's been struggling with postpartum depression and left home without telling anyone. We're just concerned for her safety." The officer looked at Sarah, taking in her disheveled appearance and the crying baby in her arms. "Ma'am, your husband says you're under psychiatric care?" "She is," Blake said before Sarah could respond. "She's been hospitalized recently for her own protection." Marcus stood up slowly. "Officers, I'm Marcus Wright with the Seattle Times. I have evidence that this woman is being systematically abused and her husband has committed multiple crimes." "Sir, please stay out of this," the second officer said. "This is a family matter." "It's not a family matter when there's evidence of murder," Marcus replied, but his words sounded fantastic even to Sarah. Blake's expression darkened for just a moment before returning to concerned neutrality. "Mr. Wright has been harassing my family for months with baseless accusations. He's the reason my wife is so paranoid and unstable. The officers exchanged glances. They saw a successful businessman retrieving his mentally ill wife and a journalist with a reputation for sensational stories. The choice was easy. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," the first officer said gently. "Your husband is worried about you and the baby." Sarah looked at Marcus one last time. He nodded almost imperceptibly, confirming that the recording was safe, the evidence preserved. "I understand," Sarah said quietly. She allowed Blake to take Emma from her arms, watched him hold their daughter with what might have been genuine tenderness. For a moment, seeing him cradle Emma, Sarah almost believed he might change, might choose love over ambition. Then Blake met her eyes over Emma's head, and Sarah saw the truth. He felt nothing but satisfaction at having retrieved his property. "Let's go home," Blake said softly. "We'll get you the help you need." As they left the diner, Sarah caught Marcus's eye one last time. He was already on his phone, probably calling his editor. The story would break within hours. But Sarah wouldn't be free to see Blake's downfall. The police followed them back to the penthouse, ensuring Sarah's safe return. Mrs. Crawford was waiting with Dr. Foster, both wearing expressions of practiced concern. "This confirms our worst fears," Dr. Foster said as they entered. "Mrs. Morrison clearly needs more intensive intervention." Blake nodded gravely. "Whatever's best for her and Emma." As they led her toward the elevator, Sarah felt oddly peaceful. She had done everything possible to expose Blake's crimes and protect her daughter. The recording would speak for itself, and Marcus Wright would make sure the world heard it. Blake might win this battle, but the war was far from over. And sometimes, Sarah thought as the elevator doors closed, the most powerful thing a woman could do was ensure her story would be told, even if she wasn't there to tell it herself. Within 6 hours of Sarah's return to the penthouse, Dr. Foster had signed new commitment papers. By noon, Sarah was back at Northwest Psychiatric Institute, this time in the maximum security wing reserved for patients deemed dangerous to themselves or others. The room was smaller than before, with no view of the gardens. A narrow window showed only gray sky and the parking lot where media vans were beginning to gather. Marcus Wright's story had broken at 7 a.m. across multiple platforms simultaneously. "Tech billionaire confesses to wife's murder," screamed from every major news outlet. The recording of Blake's confession played on loop, his cold admission of psychological manipulation and implied murder shocking the nation. But Blake Morrison hadn't built his empire without learning how to manage crisis. Sarah watched the news coverage on the room's small television, seeing Blake's counter-narrative unfold in real time. By 9 a.m., he was holding a press conference outside Morrison Technologies' headquarters. "My wife is a brilliant, troubled woman who I love deeply," Blake said, his voice breaking with perfectly calibrated emotion. "The recording you've heard is the product of her deteriorating mental state. She's created an elaborate fantasy to explain her pain, and I'm heartbroken that it's come to this." Standing beside him, Madison Sterling played the role of supportive family friend to perfection. She held baby Emma, the image of a woman helping a single father cope with his wife's mental illness. "The doctors have confirmed that Sarah is experiencing severe postpartum psychosis," Blake continued. "She's convinced that people who love her are actually trying to harm her. It's a tragic condition that affects thousands of women each year." The reporters pressed for details about Amanda Morrison, Blake's first wife. Blake's response was masterful. "Amanda struggled with similar mental health issues. I blame myself for not recognizing the pattern sooner, for not getting Sarah help before it reached this point." His voice caught. "I failed both women I've loved most in this world." Sarah watched in horror as the narrative shifted before her eyes. Domestic violence experts were being interviewed, discussing how trauma could create false memories and paranoid delusions. Blake's team had found therapists willing to explain how a woman's own mind could become her worst enemy. Even the recording was being recontextualized. Audio experts suggested it might have been edited or taken out of context. Blake's lawyers produced medical records showing Sarah's long history of psychiatric medication, her recent hospitalization, her dramatic kidnapping of baby Emma. "This is a woman in crisis," explained Dr. Janet Mills, a psychiatrist who had never met Sarah but appeared on CNN as an expert witness. "The complexity of her delusions, the detailed nature of her accusations, these are classic symptoms of postpartum psychosis. She genuinely believes these things happened." Sarah's phone had been confiscated, but she could imagine the social media response. The same internet that had briefly rallied to her support was now dissecting her mental health with the enthusiasm of amateur psychologists. By afternoon, the story was already losing momentum. Blake's poll numbers had actually improved, as voters saw him as a devoted husband standing by his troubled wife, rather than abandoning her. Dr. Foster entered Sarah's room with a clipboard and an expression of professional sympathy. "I've been watching the news," she said. "This must be very difficult for you. People need to know the truth. The truth is that you're suffering from a serious mental illness. The sooner you accept treatment, the sooner you can begin to heal." Dr. Foster consulted her notes. "Your husband has agreed to long-term residential care. With proper medication and therapy, you might be able to have supervised visits with Emma in a year or two." A year or two. By then, Emma would know Madison as her mother, Blake as her devoted single father. Sarah would become a tragic footnote in her daughter's life. "What if I refuse treatment? Then the state will assume custody of Emma permanently. Mr. Morrison would prefer to maintain parental rights, but he won't expose his daughter to an unstable environment." The trap was perfect. Accept treatment and disappear into the system, or fight and lose Emma forever. Either way, Blake won. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her locked room, staring at the television coverage of her own destruction. Blake was being interviewed on the evening news, baby Emma in his arms, discussing the importance of mental health awareness. "Sarah was the love of my life," he said, his eyes moist with unshed tears. "If sharing our story helps even one family recognize the warning signs of postpartum psychosis, then maybe some good can come from this tragedy." The interviewer nodded sympathetically. "What message do you have for other families dealing with mental illness?" "Don't give up hope. With proper treatment and medication, people can recover from even severe episodes. I'm not giving up on my wife, and I'll do everything I can to help her find her way back to us." Sarah turned off the television, unable to watch anymore. Blake had turned her rebellion into evidence of her illness, her escape attempt into a cry for help. Every move she had made had been anticipated and countered. She thought about Amanda Morrison, Blake's first wife, alone and desperate in her final moments. Had Amanda felt this same crushing hopelessness, this realization that no one would believe her, that every word would be twisted into proof of her instability? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Doctor?" Patricia Wells entered, glancing around carefully before closing the door. "How are you holding up?" "Like a woman watching her own funeral on television." Dr. Wells sat down, her expression grave. "Blake's response has been masterful. I have to admit, even I'm starting to doubt myself." Sarah's heart sank. If Dr. Wells, her only ally, was wavering, then truly no one would believe her. "But," Dr. Wells continued, "I've been digging deeper into Amanda Morrison's death. There are inconsistencies in the timeline, witnesses who were never interviewed." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "Amanda's sister says she was planning to leave Blake the week she died. She had been gathering financial documents, meeting with divorce lawyers. Not the behavior of someone planning suicide. Can you prove it?" "Maybe, but not quickly enough to help you now." Dr. Wells leaned closer. "I've been in contact with Marcus Wright. He's not giving up on this story." "It doesn't matter. Blake's already won." "Has he?" "He's made one crucial mistake." "Which is?" Dr. Wells smiled grimly. "He's kept you alive. Amanda is dead and can't tell her story, but you're still here, still fighting. And as long as you're alive, there's hope." That night, Sarah lay in her narrow bed listening to the sounds of the institution around her. Somewhere in the building, other women were fighting their own battles against systems designed to silence them. She thought about Emma, probably sleeping peacefully in the nursery Sarah had designed, unaware that her first weeks of life were being used as weapons in a war she didn't understand. Sarah pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat strong and steady. Dr. Wells was right about one thing. She was still alive. Blake had expected her to break completely by now, to accept defeat and disappear into medicated oblivion. Instead, she felt something hardening inside her. Not hope exactly, but determination. Blake Morrison had made a career of underestimating women, of assuming they would eventually surrender to his manipulation. He was about to learn that some women, when cornered, didn't break. They became dangerous. 2 months later, Marcus Wright sat in his cluttered Seattle Times office, staring at a wall covered with photos, documents, and string connecting various pieces of Blake Morrison's life. The initial story had been buried under Blake's masterful PR campaign, but Marcus hadn't given up. The door opened, and Dr. Patricia Wells entered with a thick folder under her arm. "Tell me you have something," Marcus said. "Amanda Morrison's original autopsy report," Dr. Wells replied, placing the folder on his desk. "The one that was sealed by court order." Marcus opened the file, his eyes widening as he read. "These injuries, they're not consistent with suicide. Blunt force trauma to the head, defensive wounds on her hands. Someone killed Amanda Morrison and staged it to look like an overdose. How did you get this?" "Amanda's sister hired a private investigator before she died last year. Cancer. But she left everything to me, along with a letter explaining why she thought Blake murdered her sister." Marcus studied the photographs, his journalist instincts recognizing the story that could bring down Seattle's most powerful man. "This is incredible, but it's still not enough. Blake will claim the wounds happened during her death throes, that suicide victims often injure themselves. Which is why we need Sarah Morrison alive and coherent to testify." Marcus looked up sharply. "I thought she was completely medicated, locked away permanently." "She was, but Dr. Foster made a mistake. She's been gradually reducing Sarah's medication dosages." "Why would she do that?" "Because Blake requested it. He wants Sarah lucid enough to sign custody papers, giving him permanent, uncontested custody of Emma. Once that's done, he'll probably arrange for Sarah to have a tragic accident like Amanda." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "When?" "The custody hearing is scheduled for tomorrow. Blake's lawyers have argued that Sarah's temporary lucidity proves she's responding to treatment and can make legal decisions." "Jesus, it's the perfect trap. Unless we get to her first." That evening, Dr. Wells made her way through the psychiatric facility's corridors with the confidence of someone who belonged. Her key card granted access to most areas, and the night staff trusted her implicitly. Sarah's room was in the maximum security wing, but the locks were electronic, easily overridden by someone with the right access codes. Dr. Wells found Sarah sitting by her window, staring out at the lights of Seattle. "It's time," Dr. Wells said quietly. Sarah turned, her eyes clearer than they had been in months. The reduction in medication had allowed her mind to sharpen, though her body was still weak from the months of chemical fog. "Time for what?" "To finish what you started. Marcus has enough evidence to prove Blake killed Amanda. Combined with your recording and testimony, we can destroy him. Tomorrow is the custody hearing. If I run now, I lose Emma forever. If you stay, you'll be dead within a week. Blake won't risk you speaking publicly once you've signed away your parental rights." Sarah stood slowly, her legs unsteady but her resolve firm. "What's the plan?" "Marcus is waiting outside. He's arranged for a safe house and federal protection. We go public tomorrow morning, before the custody hearing." They moved through the facility's corridors like ghosts, Dr. Wells's key card opening doors that should have remained locked. The night security guard was making his rounds on the other side of the building, following a pattern Dr. Wells had observed for weeks. Marcus waited in the parking lot with a rental car, engine running. As Sarah climbed into the passenger seat, she felt like she was being reborn. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked as they drove through the empty streets. "I've been ready for months." The safe house was a modest apartment in Georgetown, far from Blake's usual sphere of influence. Marcus had set up recording equipment and prepared questions that would methodically dismantle Blake's empire. "We'll need to work fast," Marcus explained. "Once Blake realizes you're gone, he'll mobilize every resource to discredit or silence you." For the next 6 hours, Sarah told her story with a clarity that had been impossible during months of medication. She detailed Blake's systematic manipulation, his confession about Amanda's murder, his elaborate plan to destroy her credibility and steal their daughter. Marcus recorded everything, taking notes and asking follow-up questions that revealed the full scope of Blake's criminal enterprise: the labor violations, the environmental cover-ups, the shell companies and offshore accounts. Sarah's architectural work had given her access to information Blake thought was safely buried. "One more question," Marcus said as dawn broke over Seattle. Why didn't Amanda fight back? She was brilliant, successful. Why did she let Blake manipulate her? Sarah considered the question carefully. Because women like Amanda and me were raised to trust the system, to believe that if we're smart enough, good enough, we can make things work. Blake exploited that trust. And what changed for you? Emma, when I realized Blake would do to her what he did to me, that broke something inside me. Or maybe it fixed something. I couldn't save Amanda, but I could save my daughter. At 8 a.m., Marcus published the story across every major news platform simultaneously. This time, he had Amanda's autopsy report, financial records proving Blake's criminal enterprises, and Sarah's first-hand testimony delivered with devastating clarity. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, federal agents had raided Morrison Technologies' headquarters. Blake's assets were frozen pending investigation. Madison Sterling was arrested at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, attempting to board a private jet to Switzerland. But Blake Morrison had one final card to play. The custody hearing proceeded as scheduled, with Blake's lawyers arguing that Sarah's disappearance from the psychiatric facility proved her continued instability. They painted her escape as another psychotic episode, her allegations as desperate attempts to avoid losing custody. Your Honor, Blake's lead attorney argued, Mrs. Morrison has repeatedly demonstrated that she cannot distinguish reality from her paranoid fantasies. Her latest accusations are simply an escalation of the same pattern that led to her hospitalization. Blake sat at the defendant's table holding baby Emma, the picture of a devoted father protecting his child from an unstable mother. Even with federal charges pending, his lawyers maintained that the custody case was separate from criminal proceedings. The judge, however, had watched the morning news. The weight of evidence against Blake Morrison was staggering, and Sarah's escape had been orchestrated by medical professionals who believed her story. Mr. Morrison, Judge Catherine Torres said, given the serious criminal allegations and the evidence presented this morning, I am suspending all custody proceedings pending the outcome of the federal investigation. Blake's composure cracked for the first time. Your Honor, my wife is mentally ill. These fantasies... Mr. Morrison, I suggest you focus on your own legal troubles. Bailiff, please take custody of the child pending emergency placement with Child Protective Services. Blake's face went white as officers approached to take Emma. For a moment, Sarah saw genuine panic in his eyes. Not because he loved Emma, but because losing control of her meant losing his last leverage over Sarah. As Emma was carried away, Blake locked eyes with Sarah across the courtroom. His expression was pure hatred. The mask finally dropped completely. This isn't over, he mouthed silently. But it was over. That afternoon, Blake Morrison was arrested on charges of murder, fraud, labor trafficking, and a dozen other federal crimes. The man who had terrorized two wives, stolen their work, and destroyed their lives was finally facing justice. Sarah stood outside the courthouse, free for the first time in months. Marcus Wright approached with news that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. The custody judge wants to meet with you tomorrow about emergency placement of Emma, Marcus said. Given the circumstances, there's a good chance you'll get her back. Sarah nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She was thinking about Amanda Morrison, who never got to see justice. About all the women who had been silenced, discredited, or destroyed by men like Blake. What will you do now? Marcus asked. Sarah looked up at the Seattle skyline, the city she had helped build with her architectural vision. Blake's empire was crumbling, but the buildings remained. Her work would outlast his legacy. I'm going to rebuild, she said. Not just my life, but something bigger. A foundation for women who've been silenced. Legal aid, safe houses, support networks. So no other woman has to face what Amanda and I went through. 6 months later, Sarah held Emma in the nursery she had designed, the room finally serving its intended purpose. The baby gurgled happily, reaching for the mobile of Seattle landmarks that spun slowly overhead. Blake Morrison was serving life in prison without parole. The evidence had been overwhelming, his conviction swift. Madison Sterling had pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. But Sarah's victory felt incomplete. Blake was gone, but the system that had enabled him remained largely unchanged. Women were still being gaslit, still having their realities questioned, still fighting to be believed. The Sarah Morrison Foundation launched with significant funding from the sale of Morrison Technologies assets. Sarah had donated her share to establish legal clinics, safe houses, and advocacy programs across the country. The foundation's motto, etched in glass in the lobby of their Seattle headquarters, read, "Every woman's voice deserves to be heard." Because Sarah had learned something important during her ordeal. The most powerful thing a woman could do wasn't to seek revenge against the men who tried to destroy her. It was to ensure that her story became a bridge for other women to cross, from silence to strength. As Emma drifted off to sleep in her arms, Sarah whispered the promise she made every night. "You'll grow up in a world where your voice matters, little one, where no one can convince you that your truth isn't real." Outside the nursery window, Seattle sparkled with possibility. The city Blake Morrison had tried to rule through fear was being rebuilt by the woman he had tried to break. And in that rebuilding, Sarah had found something more powerful than revenge: redemption. The glass that had once cut her had been transformed into windows, letting in light for all the women who would follow. Sarah's story shows us something crucial: that speaking truth to power isn't just brave, it's necessary. In a world where women's voices are constantly questioned, where gaslighting has become an epidemic, stories like this remind us why we can't stay silent. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of the strength that exists in every woman who refuses to be broken, then I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it. Share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone, that their reality is valid, that their voice matters. And if you believe in the power of stories that shine light on darkness, subscribe to this channel. Ring that notification bell, because every week we bring you stories of resilience, justice, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Your engagement doesn't just help the algorithm. It helps real women facing real battles know that someone cares, someone believes them, someone is listening. Drop a comment below and tell me, what moment in Sarah's story hit you the hardest? What would you have done in her situation? Let's start a conversation that matters, because every time we share these stories, every time we refuse to look away, we're building a world where the next Sarah won't have to fight alone. Until next time, keep speaking your truth. Keep believing in justice, and never forget that your voice has the power to change everything.